Hi, this is Silas. I'm making this video to talk about my cube, Changeling's Theatrical Cut, do a brief sort of introduction to the cube as a whole, and then we're going to talk about what the most powerful cards in the cube are, at least from my perspective. So, what is Changelings, the Theatrical Cut? It's kind of a weird name. We're going to go over the what, why, how of this cube. So the cube concept is what there's a rules modification that all creatures have all creature types in all zones. If there is a game object that is a creature, it has all creature types. That's it. That's the extent of the rules modification. The inspiration for this cube came from listening to Lucky Paper Radio talk about the Changeling Cube by Donald K. Magic. I attribute this Changeling Cube concept to him. You can find a link to it on the page for this cube. Sort of talking about a little bit about the philosophy of what this cube is meant to be. It's meant to be on the board, kind of focused in terms of how it plays. Just really trying to be as thematic as possible in pushing the Changeling Cube theme. And there's an idea that was running through my head a lot as I developed this cube initially. This idea of sort of detribalization, that as you are playing this cube, drafting this cube, that the creature types just sort of melt out of your brain such that creatures are just creatures rather than creature types really being in your head at all. Sort of the if everything has all creature types, then nothing has creature types concept. That kind of mindset is what I wanted to capture in this environment, that as you interact with it, that the creatures are effectively just creatures rather than their creature types mattering in a real way. In other Changeling cubes, you'll see cards like Nameless Inversion and Amoeboid Changeling that strip creature types off of creatures. You will not see those cards in this cube for that reason. I don't really want to call that much attention to the creature types as a thing, I guess you could say. I want it to, like I said, melt out of your brain as you're interacting with this format. Naming scheme. What the heck do I mean by theatrical cut? As I was developing this cube, I realized there's a lot of different things that you can do with this concept. It is extremely flexible, and there were a couple of different perspectives that I wanted to take on it, but couldn't really make them all fit at the same time, and they don't really work super well together. So the idea that I had was to create a number of modules, card modules, that would combine together to create different versions of the Changeling Cube experience. The naming scheme reflects those different versions of the cube. The theatrical cut is the base version of the cube. It is the most slimmed down, streamlined version, is the version you get as your first experience with Changeling Cube as an environment. And there are other modules, other cuts that represent different perspectives on this idea. There's the community cut, which is custom cards. You can find that on my CubeCobra. There are other ideas that I have for a more power maxed version, like a really, really power maxed version of the concept. That's like the professional cut. Outtake cut is all like uncards and digital cards and silly stuff, but you get where I'm going with it. The thing that I really wanted to talk about in this video, what's power when everything has Changeling? And by power, I mean like the Power 9 cards, the sort of the most famous cards in Magic's history. If you're not familiar with the idea, in normal Magic, the Power 9 cards are Black Lotus, the 5 Moxen, Mox Sapphire, Mox Jet, Mox Ruby, Mox Emerald, and Mox Pearl, Ancestral Recall, Time Walk, and Time Twister. Now, whether Time Twister deserves to be on that list is a matter of a little bit of contention. It's mainly there for history's sake, though really I think Soul Ring deserves that 9th spot. It's just better as a card, and some people might say that they're better than Mox, and I don't know if I necessarily agree with that. And I wanted to take that sort of idea of finding the most powerful cards in an environment and discussing that concept in my own environment of Changelings, Theatrical Cut, seeing what the rules modification does to determine what's powerful in the environment. Notably, this cube is not power maxed. Like I said, there's like a really power maxed version that I might get to in the future, but this one is definitely a cut below that, so you won't see actual Power 9 cards in this cube. We're looking at the perspective of what's power when you don't have power and everything has Changeling. concepts going into this breakdown. We're looking at this from a pack one, pick one perspective, which means not only is it in a vacuum, like, what's the best card to take as generally the most powerful, it also has to do with how that card is setting you up to have success in your draft going forward, right? What things are going to give you the best shot of having the best deck that you possibly can from that draft. And in terms of what makes those kind of cards good, there's a couple of concepts that are going to be recurring throughout, so I just wanted to address them at the front. The first one is force multiplication. With so much of the cube tapping into similar synergy space, force multiplication means taking what you were already going to be doing and making it better. And some of these cards are the best at taking what you were already doing and making it better than what your opponent is doing. The next concept is opportunity cost. How easy is it for you to include it in your deck? What are you giving up to include this in your deck, right? Are you committing to a color? Are you committing to a particular strategy? And then natural synergy. Like I said, there are broad themes that are very common in this environment, and tapping into those natural synergies, enabling those synergies is a concept that we'll see as well, which is a little different for force multiplication because the force multipliers are more about making the other stuff that you're doing good, whereas the cards that go into more of the natural synergy bucket are themselves the cards that your force multipliers are making good. We're going to be starting from the bottom. We're going to go 9 to 1. So what's card number 9? What's the bottom of our power 9? It's Throne of the Grim Captain. Throne of the Grim Captain is an awesome card. It bumps up in my estimation every time I see it in play. It used to be that in earlier drafts of this video, this did not make the list. At first blush, it requires a lot of setup. And the thing is, it really doesn't. It looks like it needs a lot of support. You need to get 4 different creatures into your graveyard. Yes, in Changeling Cube, they can just be whatever creatures. The throne is going to do that for you. If you have any sort of density of creatures, which is the default in Changeling Cube, you're going to get there very quickly. Having additional tools to fill your graveyard is nice, but it isn't necessary. There is also a decent amount of graveyard synergy already floating around in the cube, and this just really supercharges any of your graveyard focused decks. You want cool targets to recur with the Grim Captain once you flip it, but the Grim Captain is a good enough threat by itself that anything that you can feed to it is worth it. In many situations, it's even worth it just to pick up your other creatures off of the battlefield just to flip this. And between being an artifact on the front side and having hexproof on the back side, this is an extremely difficult to remove card. There's not a lot of ways to get rid of artifacts in the cube. It's pretty difficult to keep this from flipping. And then on the other side, you just can't target it at all. And blocking it down is incredibly difficult to do. It's a 7/7 menace trample, and the lifelink matters a lot as well. The only reason this isn't higher is that number 4 in the craft cost. Costing 4 mana to transform this is not difficult, but it does mean that it has to happen at a certain point into the game, which is fine. I don't want this to be easier to flip because of just how brutal it is once it's there. In addition to just having a bunch of keywords on the back side, it's also recurring the stuff that you exiled to it and making them sacrifice their permanents, again making it more difficult for them to interact with. Card's great. None of these cards are cards you should be passing. They are cards that you should be bending over backwards to include in your deck. This is a minimal opportunity cost. It looks like a heavier commitment than it is. It's really not hard for this to get going. Any amount of attrition in a game is going to feed the throne, and it is going to pay you off in a big way. The game becomes about the Throne of the Grim Captain basically as soon as it comes down, no matter when it comes down, really. Next card, Woodland Liege. I really like this card. It's scary, but it is perhaps not quite as scary as it looks. The card that this is really reminiscent of is Wirewood Savage, which is basically exactly the same card, except it also counts your opponent's beasts entering the battlefield, drawing you cards, which is way too powerful for this cube. Because it counts any beasts entering under your control to draw you cards, it includes itself. At worst, this is a 2/2 that draws you a card when it enters the battlefield. Even if they remove it immediately, even if it somehow dies immediately, you are at least getting a card off of it unless they counterspell it, which means it's extremely difficult to interact with in a profitable way. You're basically always getting at least a 2-for-1 off of this card. This is a card that snowballs extremely quickly. Drawing cards draws you more creatures that draw you more cards. It gets you a lot of advantage really quickly, and it turns a lot of your stuff that you were already doing into stuff that you can sandbag. This makes it very easy for you to recover from a board wipe when all of your creatures refill your hand. All right, so let's move on. It's Unholy Annex and Ritual Chamber. This card is pretty crazy. I haven't seen it in play quite as many times as I would like, but I have heard that this card does crazy things from people who've had some experience with it in this environment. It is stupid easy to get going. The worst case scenario, you put it into play as like a bad Phyrexian arena, is not the worst thing that could possibly happen. Those cards are going to have creatures in them, and those creatures are going to make Unholy Annex start killing your opponent and buffering your life total. And then if you're at a point in the game where you don't need that kind of card advantage, you need to focus on board presence, you have a giant threat. You have a 6/6 flyer for 5 mana, which is just hilariously aggressive in its costing. It's good on turn 3, it's good on turn 5, it's great on turn 8 if you have 8 mana to do both of these at the same time. All of those use cases are pretty incredible, and the room itself, the enchantment itself, artifacts, enchantments are difficult to remove. You are committing to black, and that's not a bad spot to be in. The cards just keep on flowing. Even if you are in a spot where you are struggling to keep something on the board, if you're able to get 2 procs of losing life and then 2 procs of draining, you come out even and they lost life. So it's really, really easy for this to be a positive transaction on life in addition to getting you up on cards. It's just really, really good. Pyroglyph. Putting number 6 on the list is going to be somewhat controversial. This is the most notorious card in the cube. Pyroglyph has an immense reputation of being utterly bonkers. That is totally deserved. There's a sort of tipping point between 3 and 4 mana where cards that cost 4 or more have to justify their price tag to be playable in this environment, and Pyroglyph is probably the best at doing that. Because not only is it doing the sort of force multiplication, natural synergy type stuff of making your other cards better, it also is good by itself. Like the Woodland Liege, it is extremely difficult to go 1-for-1 with Pyroglyph because it is going to burn something when it comes in. Even if it's only for like 2 damage or something, that's still good for you. It's impossible for them to keep a board state if you are able to make Pyroglyph go, and then it just kills them. If you don't need to remove stuff off of their board, you could just kill them. There are some funny shenanigans with the power and toughness setting ability going off of cards in all graveyards. There's the classic Tarmogoyf trick with Lightning Bolt. If there are 2 card types in graveyards that don't include instant, when an opponent casts a Lightning Bolt targeting Pyroglyph, the instant going to the graveyard puts Tarmogoyf up to 4 toughness before state-based effects can make it die to the 3 damage from Lightning Bolt. You get little shenanigans here and there like that with Pyroglyph, but you honestly don't even need that for it to be good. It sets you up for the future because red is the best color. Red is in Changeling Cube as blue is in Vintage Cube. You know, like we mentioned with the Power 9, the only cards that aren't artifacts in the Power 9 are blue cards. That's because blue historically is the best color for that environment. And Pyroglyph being red slots into that same kind of dynamic. Red is the deepest color in the cube. I've seen 3-4 drafters in an 8-man pod be red and feel supported in that color. It's just that deep. It's really, really good. You would expect it to be green, but the thing about green is that green has some really good top end. The best cards in green are fantastic, but there's sort of a lack of depth in the mid and low parts of the power band in green, not measuring up to what red is doing. Red kind of is strong sort of all the way down, and green doesn't go quite as hard. Soren, Imperious Bloodlord. This one's a newer addition to the cube. I brought it in the Tarkir Dragonstorm update, and this is an interesting include in the history of the cube because there's a couple of different restrictions that I've had on myself in terms of what I'm including in the cube, what strategies are available. And one of the ones I've had a really tight hold on the reins of is cheaty effects that just put creatures directly onto the battlefield from not on the battlefield. Reanimator is part of that. Ramp is kind of part of that. But really, this kind of directly from hand into play is the one I've had kind of the tightest hold on. This is one of the most direct ways that I've pulled back on that restriction recently. Because there's a lot. There's so many like weird cheat effects in the history of Magic that are creature type based. So this is basically Black Show and Tell, and they don't even get anything off of it. They don't get to put something into play off of it. And even once you do your show and tell thing, Soren does a bunch of other stuff. He gives your stuff Death Touch and Lifelink encounters, and he can sack stuff to Lightning Helix things. So it's an extremely modal card, and it gives a lot of lasting value over time. But the thing about that show and tell aspect is that it really lets you play the game on a totally different axis. Like I said before, about these picks setting you up for success in the draft, this card lets you play the game in a totally different way. It lets you make picks that other people don't want. It lets you take advantage of a unique spot that you have at the table to build a totally different deck and want totally different cards, which really sets you up to have a powerful deck without really competing for the same kinds of cards as other players. So I think that's a really important aspect of how Soren plays and what effect it has on the environment. Number 4, Harmonic Prodigy. Harmonic Prodigy being over Pyroglyph is maybe a hot take. I think it's worth it. I think being 2 mana makes a huge deal. And this is sort of the real highlight in terms of force multipliers, like I was talking about. It's just so strong. It doesn't look like it at first blush, but Harmonic Prodigy is crazy powerful. Just think about all the things that Roaming Throne is doing in normal Magic, and take 2 mana off of that, and you get Harmonic Prodigy. Harmonic Prodigy does crazy things. And in this environment, it has the sneaky modification to its text that allows it to double its own abilities. It says, if an ability of a shaman or another wizard, it itself is a wizard, but in this environment, it is also a shaman. So its prowess double triggers, which is really nice when you're trying to, play into that spellsy sort of theme that you get in blue-red, which is fun. It's not the strongest part of the card. Just doubling everything else that you're doing is really, really powerful because triggered abilities are one of the most common things you can find in the cube. There are a couple of other cards that also increase your triggered abilities in the cube, but they have more limits on them, like Naban Teen of Iteration only doubles triggers when they enter the battlefield, and the difference there is actually really striking. Harmonic Prodigy is a lot better than Naban for that reason, because it doubles stuff that isn't just ETBs. And again, setting you up to be in a strong color in red. All right, now we're getting into the top 3. These are the 3 best cards in the cube. So number 3 is Ayula, Queen Among Bears. Ayula is crazy. Every time this card hits the battlefield, the game really, really does contort around Ayula. And that's the thing that I've cut cards from the cube for doing, like Modern Horizons 3 Ajani. I cut Ajani from the cube for contorting the game too much around itself, and Ayula is like right there, such that it's one I have my eye on. I really want Ayula to be good here. I'm okay with it being a really strong card. It's just a matter of, is it too far beyond the pale in terms of power? I'm okay with there being powerful outliers in the cube. It makes drafting easier. It makes it easier for people who aren't as familiar with the environment to get into it if they can recognize what those power outliers are. And it can make it so, the classic rare and mythic rare reason for existing of, letting less skilled players still be successful against stronger players, which is ultimately good for new players. I think it's good for this format. But Ayula, for what she She is extremely aggressively costed. She makes everything that you do just incredibly powerful. This is one of the natural synergy pieces that I was talking about. I think Harmonic Prodigy Ayula demonstrates that dichotomy very well, where Harmonic Prodigy is a force multiplier and Ayula is a natural synergy piece, where her abilities make your stuff so much better by doing crazy things whenever you do anything. Like how Pyroglyph turns everything that you have into a Flame Tongue Kavu, Ayula basically does the same thing, because the things that are going to be fighting are always going to be bigger than the things that they're fighting. Your stuff is always going to be bigger than their stuff because of the counters, and then it's going to eat your stuff, and then it's going to eat you. You will die to the bears if you are not managing Ayula appropriately or just getting her off the battlefield as quickly as possible. And that sort of, playing a bunch of tokens to make Ayula good is the stuff that you already want to be doing, because that's what makes everything good in this cube. Amazing. Card is fantastic. Number 2, Mox Jasper. Now this is again another very new inclusion to the cube, premiering in Tarkir Dragonstorm. So in a way, it's kind of a called shot as to what I think is going to be good going forward, rather than based on experience. Most of these cards are based on experience with them, but like this and Soren are kind of the called shots in terms of what I think is going to be good in the future. And Mox Jasper is really, really strong. I really like that the hoop is control a dragon rather than spend the mana to cast a dragon, because one of the things that I've kind of struggled with is keeping non-creatures relevant in the format, and having this help you cast non-creatures helps out a lot. And the hoop of having a dragon, it's funny, is what makes this card not actually that good in normal Magic, but in Changeling Cube, it is just the easiest thing in the world. It is the thing that you most want to do, is have creatures in play. And as a literal 0-cost card, there is no opportunity cost for drafting and including this card in your deck. If you see this card, you should take it, you should not pass it, and you should 100% include it in your deck. And then it does all of the funky mock stuff. It increases your storm count. It is an artifact. It's a non-creature spell. It's a thing that gets you mana if you flicker it, that kind of stuff. Those little small shenanigans and edges that Moxes have that just naturally. Now, some might say that this is too good for this sort of environment, but the thing is that the hoop of have a creature in play first for this to do anything, I think makes this closer to Mox Opal than it does to Mox Jet, for example. I think it keeps it at a reasonable power level, but it is very likely that it could be extremely degenerate in the future. And then, drum roll please, for the best card in the cube, it's Retrofitter Foundry. This card is crazy. Oh my gosh. It is crazy how this card takes over games. It kind of just does everything that you want. If Mox Jasper is actual 0 opportunity cost, this is effectively 0 opportunity cost by costing 1 generic mana. The difference between the two is that by the time your opponent can remove Mox Jasper, they don't really want to, because it's just a mana source, whereas Retrofitter Foundry, they really desperately want to get off the battlefield, and it's really difficult for them to do so because artifact removal is a little sparse. It really does change the game around itself. It's maybe not quite as obvious at first blush, but it really, really does. It turns your early plays into massive beaters, and then gives you the ability to turn excess mana into more board presence by making tokens and then upgrading those tokens. Effectively, as long as you have this in play, you have an emblem that says pay 5 mana, tap, make a 4/4, which is really strong. The more mana that you have, the better this card is. This card also blinks removal, because you can sacrifice any creature that you have and turn it into a 4/4, something that you were kind of already wanting to do. But if they point a kill spell at your chunky creature that they're scared of, you just turn it into a 4/4. And effectively you went 1 for 1, or 0 for 0 really, with that removal spell. They spent a removal spell to change your creature into a 4/4, which is really bad Pongify if you think about it. It also changes the speed that a lot of interactions can happen at. A thing that comes up fairly frequently with this cube is that because everything is really based around creatures, a lot of stuff happens at sorcery speed, and Ritual Fatal Foundry makes it so that a lot of that stuff can happen at instant speed. You know, everything that cares about creatures entering the battlefield, you can have it happen at any point that you want rather than just whenever you can cast a spell. It also makes it really difficult for your opponent to interact in combat. You can take whatever thing they're trying to block down and turn it into a 4/4. They try to swing into you. You can sack a thing and make an untapped 4/4 to block with. Really a headache to evaluate on the other side because there's so much optionality to it. It's honestly so difficult to interact with. And that's just a huge boost. This is the card that I see go around way more than it should. Honestly, all these cards are cards that I've seen go longer than they should in packs, but this is one of the ones that really slips under the radar when it absolutely should get picked as soon as it is seen. It's just that good. So that brings us to the end. Thank you so much for sticking around to listen to me ramble about Changeling Cube. This is one of my favorite things about Magic right now. You can see the cube. You can look at the overview for the cube at CubeCobra.com/cube/overview/theatrical. Yes, that's a cumbersome URL. No, I don't have any way of making it shorter because that's just how CubeCobra works. You can see the list itself. CubeCobra.com/cube/list/theatrical. The overview will also have links to Donald K. Magic's Changeling Cube. Go check that out. You can look at the community cut, which I intend to make a video about in the near future. You can see the community cut linked from the overview as well. If you want to reach out to me, you can reach me, just DM me here on YouTube, DM me on CubeCobra. I go by Silas_MN on Discord. My main hangout spot is the Custom Magic Discord. So that's where you're more likely to find me. But of course, you can always just DM me. Thank you so much for watching and have a great day.